Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the advocacy request for Preservation Advocacy Week 2022 for the Federal Historic Tax Credit. My name is Michael Phillips. I'm the Director of Public Policy with National Trust Community Investment Corporation. Let's get started. So I have put a couple of slides here that you can pause this video to check out some of the background of the Historic Tax Credit. And then I've also included some stats to review about the impact of the historic tax credit since 1977, the program's inception. Some of the challenges that are faced that folks in the historic rehab industry are facing right now. There have been numerous IRS rulings and partnership requirements that have diminished the value of the historic tax credit. In 2017, tax reform spread the delivery of the credit to the building owners over 5 years, which has also diminished the value of the HTC because of the time value of money. In the past 2 years, there have been challenges in financing projects and also on site, skyrocketing costs of materials, labor and supply chain shortages, risk tolerance with investors and banks, rental income and leasing issues, appraisal values, and loan commitment issues. So this has been going on for the past 2 years. Folks in the industry have been monitoring and tracking this, and it is culminating now to where it's actually showing up in stats. In the total numbers for FY 2021, Part 2 applications are down about 20% when you compare that to FY 2019, which was the last pre-pandemic year. So how can we solve a lot of these problems? The Historic Tax Credit Growth and Opportunity Act would make improvements to the historic tax credit. The historic tax credit has not been modernized since 1986. The House version of the bill includes a temporary increase from 20% to 30% to address a lot of these challenges that have happened in the last 2 years. The Senate bill has these 4 permanent enhancements, and the House bill does as well. But the Senate bill only has the permanent enhancements to the bill. Those permanent enhancements are a 30% credit for small projects under 2.5 million in QREs. It would also, there's a provision that would lower the substantial rehab threshold from 100% of a building's basis to 50%. So right now your rehab costs have to total at least 100% of a building's basis. We believe that is a total rehab, and a substantial rehab would be 50% of a building's basis for the costs incurred by the rehab. Eliminating the basis adjustment requirement. This provision would bring better pricing to historic tax credits. It would also bring more affordable housing tax credits to projects because those are calculated by a building's basis. Right now, you have to subtract the amount of the historic tax credit from a building's basis. And that causes a few problems in the investor realm, which makes investors have to assume tax liability when they're trying to get a tax incentive. But it also impacts smaller projects. It impacts both small and large projects. Next provision is simplifying tax rules for nonprofit sponsored projects. Nonprofit projects are very impactful in communities. Right now, they have to jump through a lot of hoops to use the historic tax credit. In some cases, cannot use the historic tax credit. Right now that nonprofits, they have to have a very large project in order to make the financing work. We want to make it easier for nonprofits to use the historic tax credit. And this provision helps nonprofit projects move forward. Feel free to go to congress.gov and see if your members of Congress are co-sponsors of HTC Go. You can type in the bill number there and see who has signed on. You can also categorize by state to see everybody from your state. There are only 10 Senate co-sponsors right now because the bill was introduced in the summertime, right in the middle of the Build Back Better advocacy. So there are quite a few senators that could and should get on this bill. The House co-sponsors were up to 71. Our highest number we've ever gotten is 88. So we'd really like to push and try to get over 100 co-sponsors this year. We think it is a great time to get members of Congress to co-sponsor HTC Go. So just some background on Build Back Better. That was President Biden's signature 2021 legislative priority. The HTC House bill, HTC Go House bill, was included in the Ways and Means markup of Build Back Better. As negotiations went forward with moderate senators, President Biden released his framework on Build Back Better and reduced the total size of the bill from 3.5 trillion to 1.75 trillion. And in doing so, almost all of the community development provisions were eliminated. Build Back Better negotiations broke down with Senator Manchin in December. With inflation rising to 6.8%, he felt like it was not the time to put more federal money into the economy. And also he believed the size and the scope of the bill was actually much larger than 1.75 trillion because there was popular provisions that were only in the legislation for 2 years, and he believed that those would get extended. And when you looked at the 10-year score of the bill, it'd be much larger. So where are we now? Inflation has risen to over 7%. And the negotiations and the deals that were being discussed in December have now been pulled off the table. There is a slim chance of a large Build Back Better bill later this year. There may be something passed called Build Back Better, but it will be much smaller than what was being negotiated in 2021. So what's the outlook for 2022? There are a number of tax provisions that expired in 2021 and that are set to expire in 2022. Many of those tax provisions were part of the 2017 tax reform that Republicans passed. And there is a lot of discussion about the possibility of Republicans gaining the majority in the House in the 2022 elections. This would set up a similar political dynamic as 2010, where it was a very busy lame duck session. 3 major pieces of legislation were passed in 2010. And it could set up a similar dynamic, and there could be opportunity to insert HTC provisions in this year-end bill. So advocates should request co-sponsorship of HTC Go and inclusion in future moving legislative vehicles. So just some details about the requesting co-sponsorship for HTC Go. If possible, share challenges of HTC projects that are being experienced in your community, any financing gaps, any troubles obtaining capital. Explain how the enhancements to the HTC will contribute to economic recovery, how historic rehab and more historic rehab in your community will benefit economic development. Think about mentioning the historic rehab's contribution to mitigating climate change. You will want to mention this especially to Democrats, and request the HTC provisions of HTC Go in future moving legislation. I would say that you should consider the policy positions of members of Congress when you're speaking to them. I would not mention Build Back Better to Republican offices. Build Back Better was completely a Democrat partisan exercise. So I would mention to Republican members of Congress the small project provision, the fact that half of all historic tax credit projects are less than $1 million in total costs. So think about the policy positions of your members of Congress and bring forward the facts that they will care about. If you'd like to look up state maps and project lists, you can feel free to go to the website there at the National Trust, and they have maps and lists of projects that you can bring to your meetings. Just want to say thank you for leading advocacy in your state. As you know, relationships with members of Congress and staff is important, and it's not a one-time thing. You need to speak to them throughout the year. We encourage you to share with them projects challenges on the ground, grand openings, groundbreakings. Keep in touch with them throughout the year. And if you have any questions, please direct them to Christina Hingle. Christina is a longtime advocate of the historic tax credit. And if you have any questions for me, she knows how to forward those questions to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. My name is Michael Phillips. I'm with National Trust Community Investment Corporation, and we look forward to seeing you in March.